Okay. Hi, Margaret. I'm here with Margaret Agard.
Agard. Mhm.
Agard, sorry. I will get that right at one stage. I will get that right. Thank God I don't have to repeat it that often. Agard, isn't it?
Agard.
Okay. I'm here with Margaret Agard, and I am the Zenith, and this is another episode of the podcast of the Spirit Channel. Hi, are you Margaret?
I'm good. I've been looking forward to this all day. Thanks, Zenith.
Hi is California or Florida where you are at the minute?
Florida. Started in California, ended up in Florida. Yeah.
All right.
Florida has more rain.
Oh, really? Is Florida not the Sunshine State?
Well, they call it that, but it rains almost every day, but usually in the afternoon. And so this is great, because my husband Parker loves to garden. In California, it was a little harder. Yeah.
Right. Okay. It doesn't sound to be too much different from where I am actually at the minute. We just get constant rain and a few sunny days sprinkled in between. So because our sunny days are so rare, when it gets above 12 degrees, everybody takes that as a time to get their tops off and bikinis out then. Anything above 12 degrees.
Huh, that's funny. Down here, when it gets medium cold, like other places, you'd be wearing a jacket. They've got wool caps on and down jackets and mittens, and you're like, I was thinking a long sleeve shirt, but yeah.
Brilliant. So Margaret is the author of three books, the In His Footsteps series, and she also ran a radio show. And interestingly enough, Margaret is a Christian mystic who has heard the voice of God for quite a long time, or quite a long portion of her life. Margaret, could you just explain what a Christian mystic is to you? Because I think most people who would have heard that term would have been thinking back to the days of Jesus and some sort of bearded hermit who lives in a cave. That I think that would be most people's idea of a Christian mystic, and maybe someone who conjures up spells and stuff like that. Obviously, it's quite far from what you would imagine. Could you just explain your interpretation of that?
As I understand Christian mystic, it's a person who desires to hear the voice of God and to live, and for me to live my life in that sense of being in the presence of the divine, to constantly, I would say, have his spirit to be with me all the time. And that's my goal. And that, sitting on a mountaintop isn't going to get me there, because it's interacting with people where I have to really learn how to stay there. Yeah.
You know what? Actually, just actually thinking about that statement, is that something that I don't know about you, but that's something that I can identify with. Like, people say, what's your ideal holiday or what's your ideal thing? And I'd love to be here and I'd love to be there. For me, I've always said, like, get me to Mozambique, or get me to Papua New Guinea, so that I can isolate from the world and live with some sort of tribe, because I am quite a loner. But in order to be of service, like yourself, I realize that you have to interact with people, and you have to make yourself immersed in society.
It's true.
It's absolutely true. So yeah, you're the author of three books, In His Footsteps books, and we're here just today to talk about the first one, but I suspect that we'll be on again talking about your second and your yet to be released book. But yeah, your first book, how did that come about?
I really felt again, the spirit God saying to me, I want you to write your life online. This was back around 1999. So before blogs were all over the place, I didn't quite know how to do it. And finally, I found a site called Open Diary, which is still around. And I began to write these stories of what was happening in my life and what I learned. And just as I did that, and what I was doing at that time, I had just started again this practice of getting up every day and saying, what do you want me to do today, God? So a lot of what's in there was what happened when I prayed that, what happened that day. And so after about a year and a half, 2 years of that, the thought came, okay, now you need to write a book. And I thought, oh, so I was taking the stories, trying to figure out how to massage them or rewrite them. And the thought came, no, that is the book. The book is done. Just put them in it. And so that's what I have. And so that became the first book. I actually, I went through and picked and chose the ones that fit that theme.
Yeah.
Giving my life to God by giving my to-do list to God.
And what a great book it is. As I said, I've read it from start to finish, and found it very funny, some very funny stories in it. Very self-depreciating. Despite everything that you do, there are no airs and graces around you. There's no sense of piousness around you. You're very down to earth. You're very open and honest about the problems and the traumas that you've suffered. And that's just something that I want to talk about now, because obviously being a Christian mystic, writing a number of books, hosting a radio show, people would think that you've always had it together, that you've always been pretty much successful. But knowing you and obviously the conversations that we've had and reading your book, it wasn't always like that. You were far from this person originally, which you mentioned in your book. You'd suffered a lot of trauma, and you were raising a family of 8 on your own because your marriage, I think 25 years, had fallen apart and your husband had left. At that time, not only were you raising a family of 8, but you were doing night classes. And during the day, you were also working as a computer consultant. So that must have been extremely difficult for you at that time.
It was. And I had been on the executive level. I knew how to make priorities. I knew how to focus on the most important things and not get distracted by busy work. But each of those things was a full-time job. Raising 8 children, especially teenagers, takes a lot of time. Going to school full-time, I only had two semesters left at university, and I have finished my degree. So I just wanted to pound it out. And then being a computer consultant, if you work, it's like meeting with the clients is part of the time, then going back and getting done what they need done is another part of the time. So I would make my daily to-do list. Oh, well, here's what I have to do. And I see no way to do it all. But here's what I think is critical, must be done today. And often I would do that only to find out it wasn't needed. I would spend 4 or 5 hours finishing up a paper for a class, only to walk in and see a sign on the door, teacher's sick, bring your paper on Friday, something like that. I was like, oh my goodness. Then I go to a client, having worked on their reports or their bits of code, and they would be saying there's something similar. Oh, we've decided we want to change that. It's done. I mean, they paid me for it, but still, they wanted it redone. And I'd think, well, it doesn't matter what I do. I seem to be often doing the wrong thing. And I could have used that 5 or 6 hours doing something else. I was only getting about 4 hours sleep a night. So as I was doing that, I thought, I don't know what's coming in the future. I can't see down the road that the client's going to change that, or that the teacher isn't going to be there that day. I sure wish I could. And that's when it occurred to me, I knew someone who did know that, and that was God. And so I began to say, every morning I would just say, okay, here's a list I made. Now, if you just tell me what I really need to do today, because I can't see the future like you can. And I would have these thoughts. Okay, I can cross this out. I can, excuse me, I have to cough. I can add certain things. And often I would cross out quite a few things and add 1 or 2 things that would be of service or of help to another person. I want you to just call this elderly shut-in lady, or I want you to take a meal to someone when you're fixing dinner for the kids, have them run this meal over to another person. And so 2 things came out of that. One is I was finished by 8 o'clock every night with what God said needed to be done. My life changed a little bit. Now I was getting more sleep. I stopped worrying, because it turned out what I was doing was always the right thing at the right time. And so I wasn't stressed anymore. I used to wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh, what have I left undone? And that was never happening. And my life began to change. I began to get this new life of joy, a life I didn't even realize was possible. So I was a practice I've just kept. Well, I stopped it for a little while because I thought I was doing it out of desperation and need. And I kind of felt bad for God that I couldn't live my own life, like I was like such a kid. I had to always ask him, right? But after a while, so I took my life back and I ended up in almost the same place, just overworked. And then I realized, based on Christian understanding, he wants us to ask. So I was thinking about the Lord's Prayer. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth the way it is in heaven. I tried to imagine heaven filled with angels all rushing up to God. Oh, I'm so busy. I got so much to do. Can you help me with this? Versus heaven being a place where the angels said, we are committed to your work. We know it's a good work. What do you want us to do? And I started thinking, wow, what if everybody on earth did that? How different would the world be? But that's what I started doing. It was more not just what should I do today, but what do you want me to do today, God? And I was concerned. I was worried. Like, did he know we still had to do dishes? Meals had to be fixed. There's laundry. Got to get the kids, to the library. Not so much now. Now they can just Google it. But yeah. So
Wow.
That's what I do. I just ask God, what do you want me to do today?
I'm just trying to think, because I just can't imagine that, the existing on 4 hours of sleep a night, raising a family of 8 is, as you say, more than a full-time job on its own. That's just crazy, having to prepare their meals and homeworks and schools and appointments and all the rest of it. But just on top of all that, it's a wonder you didn't have a mental breakdown, seems to me.
Oh, well, I didn't have time for that. I'll have to put that off for a while.
And I don't know whether you already covered it there, but again, maybe I just missed it there, but just what gave you the idea? Is it because you were involved with the church already that maybe you just thought of the idea of turning over your list to God? Because I don't think there would be too many people who may be in a similar situation as yourself would ever think about doing something like that.
It could have been that. And it could have been, I've been training myself to hear that still small voice, that voice of God from my early 20s. And at this point, I was in my mid 40s. So it could have been just that thought came to me. Why don't you ask God or me? But when I do my radio show time, I actually went out on the site where you can get guests and said, has anyone done this? And got quite a few calls and people who said they did it. Very interesting. One was a Baptist preacher who was burned out. He was like, done. You know what? I'm going to go get a regular job. He had the same experience I did. He started asking that same question. And he said he was done by 8:00 at night every night too. So I guess that's your knockoff time for God. And then I asked this other woman came on and she said, listen, I was working for one of those companies where they kept firing people, but not hiring new people. So you ended up doing 3 jobs instead of your own. And she was stressed like that too. Also worried that she would get fired. And so she said, I asked every hour, what should I do now? What should I do now? So that's how I got through the day. So I know it's not just me. I know other people do it and have the same results I had. She and the preacher had the same results, that he gradually changed their lives, not only to one of less stress, but one of more joy. Yeah. Without making you go be Mother Teresa in India. You got to just stay where you were. Very nice.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate, because like you, I've heard that voice too in my head, and it is a case of learning to trust it, learning to listen to it more, and learning to do what the hell it says, because generally you don't get the results that you want, and you realize that thing. But quite a lot of the time, I think that it just makes perfect sense, really, when they say that, and you're kind of wondering, why didn't I think of that? It just seems to make perfect sense, doesn't it, with the information that they give you? When it happened to me, I was kind of already sort of opened up a little bit to this kind of thing, but I actually wasn't. But really, what happened for me was through massive trauma that required me to go off and actually listen inside myself and go and try and find some sort of the meaning as to what was happening to me. So I would have spent a lot of time on my own, but I've often done a lot of walking and listening to things. And that's actually when I started hearing that voice too. And you're right, it doesn't matter whether you want to call it God or spirit or source. It's that voice that comes to you, which is from the divine ultimately. And you're absolutely right. After listening to that there, and trying to increase that, especially now that I've listened to your book, I realize that I'm not listening to that voice as much as I should. I should be actually dedicating more time to going off and actually actively listening to that voice. But I think you're right. Once you start taking the advice that's given you, you do see your life starting to change. And I've definitely seen, my life start to change from the trauma that I've endured and I'm enduring to actually just to the point where I am now. So I'm extremely grateful. But let's just talk about that little voice before, because you mentioned that you were about 20 odds or 23 when you first started hearing that.
Yes. I'm sure I'd heard it before then, but I hadn't made it a consistent practice to try to hear that voice. And what had happened is I was at church one weekend, some girl, and a teenager was sharing an experience, and she said, I prayed, and I know I'm supposed to stay on my knees until I start to feel an answer. And I thought, what? What? I thought you just prayed, popped up, and went about your day, and either what you prayed for happened or it didn't. It wasn't an idea of a relationship where I'm sitting there trying to listen to what God has to say too. And I wasn't sure I could hear his voice. So I actually went to God and said, help me. Can you help me hear your voice? Can you, I don't know how you can do it, because how can you teach me how to hear your voice if I can't hear your voice? But that was the prayer I prayed. And what happened is, right after praying that prayer, I had 3 experiences in a week, and I'll just share the one, and that's also in the book. But what happened, I already had a small family, and I started to make a big pot of chili. Well, it turned out to be a lot bigger than I had planned. I had to get a bigger pot to put it in. And as I was making this pot of chili, the thought came to me, invite these friends to dinner. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that, because they just came Friday. It's Monday. Why would I, that would look weird to invite them to dinner that soon. And so a little while later, I'm still working on the pot of chili, and the thought comes again, I should invite this family to dinner. And then I again thought, no. And especially it's Monday, because Monday we reserved for just our family. And I had a little scripture study planned for my kids that night before they went to bed. And so the thought came again the 3rd time, invite that family to dinner, invite them to stay for your scripture study with your children. And that's when I had, I wonder if this is God, because the thought coming back, and I'm kind of arguing with it. And, usually I don't argue with myself, as I think I'll eat that chocolate. Sure, go ahead. Like that. Right. But or if I blow it off, like, yeah, I'm not going to do that today, I don't think it again. But this thought kept coming back, this little insistent thought. And so I did invite them to dinner. And after dinner, we were having our little scripture study, and we were actually talking about tithing with the children, which I know is a financial principle that works like gravity. You don't have to believe in God, just.
What is tithing?
Tithing, you give 10% of what you earn, in our case, to the church, or because we know they're going to use it to help take care of the people who, need their utility bills paid or food, but wherever. And so we were explaining this to them, and the couple who were visiting, the husband said, oh, I need to tell you this story. We wanted to pay tithing too, and we were committed. We had started, and then we got behind, and we wanted to catch it up, which I don't recommend. I'm like, start where you are, just keep going. But that's what he wanted to do. And they got a check. He also was working as a computer consultant, and the check was enough to catch up their tithing, but they were low on food. So they could either catch up their tithing or buy food. And they thought about it and prayed about it and finally decided to pay the tithing. And when they went to church that Sunday, by the end of the day at church, they had invitations to dinner every night that week. except Monday night. So then I was like, oh, I'm thinking that was God's voice. I'm thinking that was that small little voice. I can't even describe it. It's calm. It's a calm voice. We'll come back if you blow it. I think he knows we're going to mostly not go, oh, I think this is God, I'll go do it. It takes a while. Yeah.
Would you say, because I'm just trying to compare it to the voice in my head, sometimes when I ask a question, the answer is there before I even get the question fully out?
Oh, that just happened to me. It was really upsetting, actually. I had this thought that I should pray to ask, what things should you take out of your life so you can build a firmer foundation in Christ, or like you said, more time with the Spirit. And so I thought about that for about 6 months, thinking, yeah, it's probably a good question. I should ask that someday. And so here's how it went. I was like, God, what should Facebook? Like, could you let me finish the question? Like, it's like, I've been waiting for 6 months for you to ask that question. So yes. And so because it's part of my business, I still go on, but I limit myself. It's like once a day, 10 minutes, where I used to be in that endless scroll. Yeah. So, yeah, I've gotten the answer before I finished asking the question. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask too is, for me, sometimes it's not words that you get back. Sometimes it's a feeling. Sometimes it's just this wash of joy or ease that comes over you. And I kind of go, right, well, I know that's like that. If I'm thinking, I wonder, should I do that? And maybe I don't, maybe because it's not a direct question, but you're sort of kind of thinking along those lines. Should I ask God? Should I ask the Spirit? Should I ask whatever? But you're kind of at the same time you're thinking, I wonder if that would be the right move for me. And sometimes, because maybe you haven't actually asked a direct question, you don't get the words back, but it's more of a feeling that you get. And okay, feel really good. I feel calm. It's this wave that washes over me. So I've taken that to interpret, right, well, this is the path that I need to follow. Is that something that maybe you can relate to, or you've had experience?
I do. And it's more, I agree with you. It's a sense of, I'm aware. There's a sense of, I'm aware. It's all going to be fine. And yes, there's the sense that when you're on the right track, the answer, you do get that good feeling. If you're not, you kind of are still in a bit of turmoil. And we say, couples should become one in their answer. And I remember reading a book where people said, listen, if you're feeling the answer is one thing and your spouse is feeling the answer is another, you haven't reached that point. And it could just be small things that need to be changed to make it work. I've had that with my husband, Parker. When we were serving as missionaries, we would spend a lot of time with people in the church who needed help. And so we would get up in the morning and pray about where to go and who to see. And I remember one day getting 2 or 3 names, and he had a different 2 or 3 names. And I'm thinking, well, he's wrong because that's how I think, right? And then we went out and had time to visit all 4 to 6 people, however it was, and found that they all needed us to be there that day. And as I was driving home, God was saying to me, I'm not going to give you the whole answer. You're working together here. So you're both going to get, at sometimes, part of the answer. Sometimes we both got the same answer at different times. And we would come together and know that was the answer.
Beautiful, beautiful. Sometimes I would get that message just before I wake up too. You just get that like right before you wake up, because you know that you're not dreaming, or the dream's ended. And just before you open your eyes, pop, there's a little message, or right, okay. Whatever it is for the day, or whatever it is that you need to do, or some sort of change that you make in your life. By the nod of your head, I'm assuming you can relate to that too.
It often, now the way I started doing this is I would do it in the morning, but I'm very committed to my plans by the time I wake up. I've thought of them off and on all night. So I started doing it at night. At night, I'll say, what should I do? But sometimes I've had a feeling, I need to call someone or go somewhere. And I'll say, well, I don't think I should call him at 6 in the morning. What do you think? And the guy would say, no, I want you to call him at 1 in the afternoon. So I put like a timer on my phone to remember to call them. And once I remember I called this woman. It sounded like she was in an airport or something. It was very hollow sounding. You know how like when you're in a big space. And she sounded upset. She said, I just found out my brother has brain cancer. He probably only has 2 or 3 months to live. It's that far. And she's very upset. And I said, well, when did you find this out? She said, 5 minutes ago. I was like, when did you find this out? She said, 5 minutes ago. I just came out in the hallway. I thought I need to talk to someone. I wish I could talk to Margaret. And then you called me because she didn't have my number on her phone. And I thought, wow, God really does know. And at the same time, there's been time when I haven't trusted, when I've thought, yeah, you're off base. I'm going to do something else. And once I got up and we had an internet business where we were selling this one product. We didn't ship her Saturday or Sunday, but we got orders, and we had orders from Friday. So by Monday morning, we had a lot of orders, half our orders for the week. So Monday was a big day for us to get that shipping out. I remember one Monday I was getting up, making my list, do the orders like that, right? And it was like, oh, don't do the orders. I thought, what are you talking about? Don't do the orders. We're a professional company. We promise that orders are going to go out next business day. This is next business day. And I don't know where your head is, but I'm doing those orders. And there was a lot more to do that day. I kind of wished I didn't have to do the orders, but I did the orders. And I went to the post office and had forgotten that it was a federal holiday, so the post office was closed. So it was like, oh, well, maybe that voice does know.
Brilliant. I think I wonder, probably like you, as you've mentioned, there is a few other people that you've come in contact with who hear that voice, and obviously kind of being who I am and people that I kind of associate with, they would talk quite a lot about that. But just ordinary, I don't want to say ordinary everyday people, because it kind of feels you're maybe putting people down, but you understand when people who don't generally hear that or don't trust that, there must be thousands, if not millions of people out there who just don't pay attention to that voice, who hear it and just dismiss it. Oh, that's just my own thoughts. It's just my own kind of thoughts. And as you turn around and say, and as I know, I think a lot of the pain that happens in our lives is a result of the consequences of not listening to that voice or our own poor choices.
It's true. I was serving in my church as Relief Society president, which meant I would go out and help people who were struggling, or people who needed visits, people who needed food, people who were in the hospital. That's what Relief Society did. And I would, again, get up every day and say, who should I go see? Because not everybody would call me and say, I need help. But God knew. And I could feel his love for them. And often, if I was just thinking about them on my own, I thought, oh my gosh, she's made such a mess of her life. And she keeps making more of a mess of her life by making these bad decisions. Like the mechanic said, don't drive your car. And she drove her car. And now she needs, like her whole engine replaced, where before it was just an oil change. So I would just look at him thinking, if they would just stop making these bad decisions. But when I prayed, and went, all I felt for them was God's love for them. I never felt condemnation. I felt nothing but compassion. I felt an understanding on his part that they really are doing the best they can, given what they know now. It was such a wonderful experience for me to be in that position, to constantly feel his love for them. And yeah,
it does.
And I believe it's true. Yeah.
It doesn't stop you, certainly doesn't stop you feeling, empathy towards them and feeling if you would only sit down and listen to that own voice in your own head, then you would probably not be in this position. But I guess this is what free will is for. Everybody's free to make their own choices. And I guess this also equates to the family as well, because I know you've mentioned the struggles with your own family. You've been quite open and honest about that. Your kids coming to you complaining about the unfairness of the world. How come that person there has such a good car and I don't have this? How come they have the latest sneakers or trainers and we don't have them? And being someone who you are, and I can obviously relate to that, that material items just do not equate to happiness. There's a brilliant saying that says that you come into this world with nothing and you leave with nothing. So why are you trying to get all these things? But obviously, family being who they are, and probably not having maybe your depth of insight, it can be hard.
Well, I do believe my one son, Matthias, he was the last one at home. And this was his complaint all the time. Like everybody else gets all the good stuff and I'm struggling. Why do I have to struggle? And I remember this conversation we had where he was saying, I don't understand why I have to struggle. And I said, because that's how you learn and grow. I was always using that weightlifter parable type thing, which is even in the scriptures, because I know Paul is talking to Timothy when he was young. He says, to work out your body is good, but to work out your spirit is better. And so I would say, look, there's no pain, no gain, right? Like if you're going to grow, you're going to have to bump up and work hard. And then he made that statement about, his friend Martin had everything given to him. His parents gave him a car. He didn't have to work to pay for it. His parents, gave him a big allowance. He didn't have to get a part-time job. And I was like, oh, really? His parents gave him all that and he's a happy boy? He said, no, he's like made a mess of his life. He's on drugs. He's crashed his car. They got him another one. They've told him when he's 18, he has to leave and he's going to be on his own. He's really going to be in trouble because he doesn't know how to do anything. I said, really? Why is that? He said, because his parents gave him everything and he didn't have to work for any of it. I said, I think, son, you've answered your own question. We struggle.
Brilliant. And another thing that you've mentioned there in your book is obviously we've just talked about problems there, problems with people, problems with our own families. And you've compared this here to like a video game analogy, which I think is very good, because I've mentioned this in my own writing about this idea of leveling up or of different video game levels. And you've mentioned that kind of where we are in these bodies, we're kind of on level 2. And you've mentioned that like the spirit, they're so much wiser. They're so much, they know everything. They're on like level 50. So they can easily solve a level 2 problem.
Right. And I do think that's true. And what I really believe is it isn't that we don't run into the same problems we had. They're just not problems because we know how to handle it. So it's like if I was a basketball player and I learned how to do certain moves, then when I ran up against a competitor on the court, it just wasn't a problem for me. I knew what to do. But the problems seem to get harder and harder. The difference in life, I think, in a video game is the pain of bumping up against those problems is real. And second, I think some people start life with level 50 problems and they spend their life working up to being healed from and being able to deal with life in spite of what happened to them when they were children.
Wow. Yeah. I totally agree with you. For me, you're absolutely right. We think, oh my God, how am I ever going to get over this here? It's too hard. It's too difficult. I've this problem in my life. But, most of the time we do get around it. We do get over it and then we grow and evolve and we start on level 2. And, the more we kind of go through life and the more trauma that we deal with, the more problems that we have, we kind of surmount them. We grow spiritually. We grow that spirit inside ourselves until we're up there, maybe not quite level 50, but maybe some point we're level 15, level 20, and those level 2 problems just don't seem the same anymore because it's like a wall. Once you've learned to climb that wall, it's not a challenge for you anymore. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that as we mentioned, there are just a lot of the time that these problems could be easily solved if we would just pay attention to that voice in our heads. that little inner voice, and grow it, as you mentioned. Just let it grow in your head. Just, it's no more than a thought, as you've turned around and said, and just trust it. And I think a lot of the problems that people could or do complain about or find themselves in could honestly be alleviated or gone. I can't even think of the right word. But if they would just take the time to stop what they're doing and listen to that little voice in their head. I think the problem is that our societies, the way they are nowadays, there are so many distractions. There are so much demands on people's times. There are so much bombardment. I've talked about this before in my own writings. It's very hard to actually get any silence or any time away from them. You're constantly, there's a radio on, people have phones up to their screen faces all the time. Nobody wants to be on their own nowadays. So I think if you have a practice of taking yourself off, and this is one of the things that I've learned from you, if you have a practice of saying, okay, well, I know I'm busy, but I'm going to take myself off for 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever the case may be, and just listen to what that voice inside me is saying about this problem, you'll generally find the solution.
I think so. And I think it helps to journal. A lot of people do like journaling. So I'm talking to the ones who already like to journal. It's a good practice to add to, just as I will question and have questions, I'll start to write in my journal the thoughts I'm having. And at some point, the thought does come, oh, wait a minute, this isn't me. At this point, I'm now hearing what God has to say. I'll let you grab that. And so one of the things, how did I want to put this? He's very concise. That's been my experience. It's concise and it's clear. So once we were getting ready to go to Alaska, it's where we were going to do our mission work. We were going to go up to north of the Arctic Circle, actually, and live in an Inuit village. And as I was preparing to go, and I didn't really want to go because it's cold and dark and there's grizzly bears, I was like, but I was preparing, doing what I could. And at one point I said, okay, I think I've done everything I'm supposed to do. What else should I do to prepare? And the thought came. It was very simple. Again, just listen. Popped right into my head immediately. It was take a brisk walk every day. Now, I know the word brisk. I have never in my life used the word brisk in a conversation, but I do know it. And so, and it, like I said, it's clear and it's concise. It was take a brisk walk. And I knew that brisk meant I didn't have to take up jogging. I didn't have to go run a marathon. And also I didn't need to go out. I wasn't supposed to go out and just sort of wander along smelling the roses. It was like, get your heart rate up, get out there and get it done. I still take a brisk walk. Well, no, I've exchanged it for rowing because I get to do rowing sitting down, which I like. So yeah. Oh, I just lost you. I'm not hearing you. Zenith? Huh. Now I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you now.
Give me 1 second because
okay.
Yeah, you're still very active, or you were very active at the time of that book coming out. You had an exercise routine.
A little short exercise routine. I did write about it, where I would get up and I would do, I don't know, I was doing push-ups and sit-ups and I went for this walk every day, a brisk walk. And now I do something similar. Now I use my indoor rower and I watch a devotional for half an hour while I row that machine. And then I have this piece of workout equipment that lets me change the weight levels just by moving a little pin, which I really like because I don't have to like unscrew things and take weights on and off. And I run through a full body routine on that. So yeah, I try to stay in shape because I think, well, what if I live to be 95? I need to be able to, I don't want to just be laying around like a blob. I want to be out and about. A woman in our community just died. She's 93 and I saw her everywhere. I was in 2 service groups and she was in that. And she tried to talk me into go into her exercise class. She goes, yeah, I go to that exercise class there. I'm like, well, I'm not doing that. But so she was active and involved right up until the day she died.
Wow. And you're what, 71 now? And you're,
Yeah, 71. Right.
wow.
And just like, yes, I got 20 more years. Maybe I need to be able to stay active. And so I can keep being of service.
Yeah, and you have that. No, we'll actually get to that later. Yeah, and you have so many brilliant examples in your book that I read about. Just getting back to that voice, do you know, like sometimes the advice it gives is not very popular to us, and we go, why on earth would I want to do that? And one of my favorite examples, actually, it's not actually in your book, it's on your website, and one of your blog posts is the ice cream cone that you bought.
Oh, the ice cream cone. Well, Parker, my husband, has this rare heart disease. And so we started eating vegan. And not only that, no dairy, and every once in a while I was like, I need a hamburger. And so I would say, I got to run to town. So I ran to town. And as I'm driving to town, I see a guy selling, I actually didn't know it was a guy, I found that out later, with a truck by the side of the road selling watermelons. And I thought, great, on the way back, I'm going to pick up a watermelon, take it for Parker. And then I went to Burger King. I don't even know if they have them where you are, but Burger King. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to get their bacon double burger special. And as I'm going through, I see, they have ice cream cones for $1. I'm getting one of those too, because it's dairy. We weren't having ice cream. We still haven't had ice cream in forever. And so as I'm getting up and I pay for the ice cream cone, I order it. She says, we're out of cones. Can we put it in the cup? I'm like, yeah, put it. I don't care how you give it to me. I just want it. And then after I paid for it, as I pulled through, that voice came. It said, give the ice cream to the person selling the watermelons. And I thought, if you told me that back when I was ordering, I could have got 2 ice creams. And the thought came, well, you don't really need an ice cream. And I thought, what are you, like my diet coach now? But okay, fine. I will give him, I looked to see, could I even get in the line again? But it was so long. I thought, nope, I guess the watermelon guy was only a mile down the road. And I thought, okay, I can handle it without eating it. And when I got there, this old man comes out from the truck. He's just covered in sweat. He's only down to about 4 more watermelons. And I thought, as I got out of my car, I said, here, I brought you an ice cream. He looked so relieved that he had an ice cream. I was glad that I had done it. I don't even miss that ice cream. But this is the one thing that I've been thinking about since then is, when do you say to people, let me tell you how loved you are by God? He knew you needed an ice cream and he sent me to bring it to you, rather than have it be my idea.
Yeah, I think, I would do that too quite a lot, because a lot of the time, sometimes people are just put in your path and they just start talking about something and you're wondering, like, what could I say to this person, or what thing, or even if you do kind of know what you're going to say beforehand, you walk away and wonder, maybe I should have said this, maybe I should have done this here. But a lot of the time I think that whatever's meant to happen was meant to happen, and sometimes no more is or was necessary for that person. So a lot of the time I think that whatever we say to people, even if it sounds mumbo jumbo to you, probably means the world to that person. Or if it's an action like you just giving that person an ice cream, maybe in their own way, they had a sign or they said, if I ever receive an ice cream, I'm going to know that it's come from God. And sometimes I think that we don't actually need to hammer that nail home, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Yeah, right. They've probably got the message loud and clear. So yeah, that would be my thing. But I do that too. Maybe I should have said this here, could have handled this a different way, or should have dropped this in, or whatever else. But I just go, well, like, I've done what I could. But one thing
You've done what I could. I love that. No, I love that. There is a woman who wrote a whole book on that, because in the Bible, there's a story about one of the Marys comes just before Christ is going to be crucified, and she breaks a bottle of oil and it covers him with oil and wipes his feet, and with her hair, actually. And one of the apostles complains, like, well, she could have sold that for a lot of money and we could have used it for helping the poor. And Christ said, she has done what she could. And often that's it. We do what we can. I like to compare it to going to a community dinner, and you help set up and you help take down, right? And you're at the community dinner, and at the end of the night, you're looking at all the stuff that has to be done. The tables have to be put away and wiped down, and things have to be vacuumed, and the dishes that were used have to be washed, the things that, you can't throw in the trash. And you're going to start doing something. I don't know what it is. Maybe you're cleaning up the bathrooms a little bit so that they'll be ready for the next group in. And then you come out to look for something else to do, and it's all done. You did your part and other people did their part. So you've done what you could.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do what you could do and have no regrets over it. I think, yeah, we did what we can, and God and Spirit, they handle the rest. One thing I did find very interesting is you not only do you get those messages, but you've also got messages. Well, I suppose I've got a few myself, but messages that actually relate to events in your future. I read in your book that you told us you were going to get a job offer like a year in advance, and you were also told that in 6 months you were going to marry again. And at that time you had no interest in finding someone. And I actually remember reading your book, turned around and said, well, I'm going to turn around and tell him that I not like golf, so it better be someone that
that's true.
Golf, because I hate golf and I would rather give birth again than have anything to do with golf.
That's right, because I was an executive in the high-tech industry. Those guys golf. And all I could think was, oh, someone's going to be reading this profile. How it happened is I had gotten the thought in February of one year that in the next fall, I was going to meet the man I was going to marry. Now, the thing about the Spirit is it doesn't come with commas. So I took it to mean that I was going to meet and marry this guy in the fall, but actually I met him in the fall and we married the following spring. Parker, that is. But the way it came about is my best friend moved and then just went silent. And she later explained it. So I had no one to talk to. I was very lonely. And my oldest son had said, he was 26. He said, I want to meet someone to marry. I'm going to go 2,000 miles away to a church school. And I was like, no, because if you go there, you're going to meet someone from California, and then you'll marry her. You'll be 3,000 miles away. She'll have to live near her family, and we'll never see you again. So no, here's this new thing. And this was new because this was in 97, that you can go online and you can go into these singles groups, and they have one just for the church, and you can meet someone there. And here, let me show you how to do it. So I put a profile up because I thought I would show them how you put one up. And I did say that in my profile. I was like, oh, I have 8 kids. They're all raised except the last 2 are in high school. I don't want any more kids. And also, here's what I like to do. But let me tell you what I don't like to do. I hate golf. I would rather give birth again than play golf. And pop up, there's Parker. I meet him. We get married, and I moved to California. My son did go to that university. He met someone, and they moved back to the East Coast of the United States within just an hour's drive of where I had been living at the time, and where the rest of the kids stayed there. They were going to university and getting married too. Yeah, that's God for you. I say he has a sense of irony. Yeah.
Just briefly, and because I did find this very funny. Obviously, you moved to California with Parker, and still are now have these peacocks.
The peacocks. Parker, I like, oh my gosh. Parker never does anything for him. I mean, he will drop whatever he's doing to help someone. He does. His family name is McGregor. And so I say he'll give you the shirt off his back, but not the money to buy it with. And he one day expressed an interest in peacocks. Well, where we were in California, some peacocks had gotten loose, for like decades before. And so they have wild peacocks. And sure enough, the next day, some peacocks came and were roosting in the trees right outside our bedroom, because I don't know why they feel the need to do that, but they do. And they make the most awful loud sound. A friend came over and was practicing playing bagpipes, and they were louder than the bagpipes. I mean, that it is loud. And I was thinking, and every morning at 3 a.m, they would start making that noise. I was thinking, what the heck? And then and Parker said, well, they keep us safe. They're like watchdogs. I thought, really? So they would make that noise, and I'd say, well, what do you think's out there, Parker? And he'd say, oh, I don't know, probably a raccoon, maybe bothering the chickens or something. And then they started landing on the deck outside our bedroom and then flying up to the roof and stomping around. It sounded like a 200-pound man on our roof. I mean, they're not graceful. Let's just put it that way. They're stomping around up there, sounding like a 200-pound man. And I thought, Parker, look at where we are. A 200-pound man could come on our property, and the peacocks would start screaming, and we would just think, oh, that's probably a raccoon. Then he could climb up on our deck. He could even stomp around on our deck, and we would ignore him, thinking, oh, that's the peacocks. So, this is not helping at all. This whole point not working. Yeah. I was like, you know what? God does do that for Parker all the time, because Parker doesn't think about himself. And I thought, maybe if I start being as unselfish as Parker, those peacocks will leave.
Fantastic. You also had a message as well that that you thought you were going to die as well. It's a bit morbid, isn't it?
No, it was so odd. I had some experiences. My father had 2 fatal diseases, and the first one was Lou Gehrig's disease when he was in his 30s, and he was promised he would live to raise his children. And then later in his 40s, now he had more children. He had ended up with 11, and my youngest sister was 3 at the time, and he was promised again he would live to raise his children, which he did. The year my youngest sister graduated from high school, he died. Both those diseases came back and he died. And so I, in a blessing once, had been promised that I would live to raise my children. And so somehow I had it in my head that when my youngest son, Matthias, graduated from high school, I'd be 50 and I was going to die. And it's just been in my head. That's what I was thinking. And so when I turned 49, I started preparing to die. I thought, well, I'm probably going to die. And I thought, well, I am just acting like me. I thought you became someone different when you bumped up against something like that. I mean, I made lists what I have to do before I die. And part of it was lose weight. Parker's like, why do you want to lose weight? And I said, because I don't want to be heavy in my coffin. Like when people, and I was so me. But then I didn't die. And I really had a sense about 6 months before I had another blessing. And I was promised that I still had many years to live. So I was talking to a friend about that. And it seemed so weird. And she said, I think maybe you just needed to realize what was most important in your life to focus on. And thinking that you were going to die, really thinking you were going to die, not like just a brain exercise, forced you to do that, which it did. It did. Although I didn't lose the weight. I mean, I was still going to be heavy on my coffin. But I did start spending other times a little differently.
Yeah. And it also made you reminisce, I guess, about all the times that you were saved. You mentioned falling off a tractor. I actually remember falling off a tractor too, although the wheel didn't go over my head. I fell off a tractor that was it was emptying the field of the hay bales. So we were working
on my gosh.
farmland, and the tractor trailer was loaded up maybe 70 bales high. I fell off the top of that, smashed my head off the ground. You actually fell off a tractor, but interestingly enough, or miraculously enough, just as the wheel was about to go over your head, it just completely missed your
head.
Hit
a rock or something. It just bounced up and just went above my head rather than across my head. That was amazing.
It does make you wonder because I've also nearly drowned as well. I nearly drowned when I was a child. I jumped
Hmm.
off into a pier, and only the fact that someone had to be sitting there and managed to grab my hand, I would have obviously been dead. But it does make you wonder, and I guess you did mention that in your book. What was I saved for a reason? Had I work to do in the world? And I guess maybe that is right because obviously the life that you've led. And obviously potentially sort of the stuff that I've done. I guess it just wasn't your time yet because maybe you had more work to do in the world.
It's true. And part of what I believe was the children, bringing those 8 children into the world. They've all become, I'll say, successful human beings. They help each other. They're educated. They're in stable marriages. And, even if they weren't, that might be part of my calling. And the second is this book and this message, he's there, you can ask him, and you can end up doing your most important, joyful work by people say, I want to give my life to God. I think, really? I mean, it's okay, I've decided to give my life to God, but how do you do that? Well, for me, this is very concrete. You give him your day because your day is your life. And so you take that to-do list and you say, what should I do today, God? And is there anything you want me to do? And then you live your life that way. And then, because your day is your life.
Yeah. You've actually give up. You mentioned in your book that you actually give up your to-do list completely. You don't have that list at all anymore.
Pretty much. I still at night, I don't take a list to him, but I will sit down and say, what will you have me to do? And a lot of times I think, well, that isn't much. I'm going to have a lot of time left over, but then something happens, some calls, someone needs help. And that fills the rest of my day. Because sometimes there's only 2 or 3 things on the list. And I think, but yeah, it's been interesting because I was always a list maker. I was the kind of list maker, and I'm sure some of your listeners are going to relate to this, that if I did something that wasn't on the list, I would put it on the list just so I could cross it off. Yeah. I'm really into my list.
I'm actually like that myself. I have a list on my phone. I have a list on my phone, 2 lists, and I'm just addicted. I'm addicted to crossing things off. And
yeah.
If there's something that wasn't on the list,
yep.
I feel like that too. I have to add it to the list just so I can cross it off.
Just so you can cross it off. Yep, that's the kind of list maker I was.
That's exactly how I am. Now, obviously, service plays a big part in your life. It plays a big part in my life. I wonder how much more can I be of service? What more can I do to be of service? And I guess at some point in your life, when you're trying to be of service, you're reconciling people that you see, because I guess sometimes it's hard maybe to see not the good in people, but sometimes we kind of think slightly less of people and maybe kind of judge them or whatever. But we then try to see them, well, if I'm going to really be of service, I need to be of service to everyone that I encounter, regardless of how I feel about them, potentially personally. And one of the things that you had mentioned is seeing people as God sees them. One of the practices that I do is recognize that the body that we're in here is just like a suit of clothes. It doesn't define us. It's just how we look at the minute. And ultimately, we are one with God. We are part of God. Our spirit is a part of God, and we're going back. So underneath this suit of clothes, we are all one at the end of the day. And you've just mentioned the seeing people as God sees them. Could you talk about that briefly?
What had happened, and again, this prayer came to me from God. Now, I had my son Daniel at that time was 15. He was the most arrogant, demanding, critical child. Like, you should have thought this through before you had this many kids, and you wouldn't, be able to buy me that special pair of sneakers, things like that. And he lettered in 3 varsity sports in high school. He just, I don't know. I loved him, but I didn't like him much. And so I had said to God, I don't even know what to do with this kid. And he said, I want you to pray to see him as I see him, which is something I do all the time now for people. I say it will just completely change your relationship. So I did pray that prayer. And a few days later, I'm over at my mom's house, and this, she had women's magazines, and she had this women's magazine. I flipped it up and I'm kind of reading through it. And there's a story about this kid who had accused his coach at school of, basically sexual abuse. And he was pilloried for it. The people loved the coach. They were mad at this kid for doing it. And I thought, wow, something like that just happened in our area. So I started reading it and realized it was about the kid in our area. And as I was reading it, he's talking about how depressed he had become, almost suicidal, because how he was being treated. And there was on his bedside stand a framed petition that only had about 4 names on it of some kids from the school who had said, "We believe you." And I remembered the day I was taking my son Daniel to school and was dropping him off, and he told me he'd written up this petition that he wanted to pass around school for the people who believed in that kid to sign it so he could give it to him. When he went to the principal said, we're not going to talk about this anymore at school. It belongs in the courts. We're not. He wasn't allowed to do it. So he was upset about that night. He was telling me what he did was he went to just a few of his friends, and they signed it and gave it to that boy. And as I read that story, I thought, oh, this is how God sees my son. He doesn't see that arrogant 15-year-old. And he's still like that. I mean, we're now 25 years in the future. He's 40. When the pandemic started, he went out and started taking food to the homeless who weren't able, people weren't going to the places they used to go, so they couldn't hit people up for money. So they just started taking them food. And he went down and started talking to the city about they had closed all the public restrooms, the libraries were closed. He's like, how are these people going to get to use a bathroom? The stores are closed. Where are they going to go? And convinced them to open some of the public restrooms back up so they had someplace, to use the bathroom. That he's still that kind of man. Yeah. That boy became that man.
Fantastic. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned this in your book, and I have my own kind of thoughts on it, and think we're both in alignment with this here, is that people always wonder about the misery in the world, the misery in the world and all of the selfishness and hatred and crime and stuff like that go on. And why does God allow this? And why doesn't God intervene? And why doesn't God stop all this? And you've mentioned quite a lot, because this concept of free will. We have free will. God gave us free will to do exactly what we want on this planet. And that obviously can mean that people will do things that will impact on other people, whether it's crime or sexual abuse or anything that may cause hurt to another person. But I wanted to link this here to, I think I'm linking this to prayer. Prayer for me is about asking for help. And I compare prayer and free will to wrestling. When we see wrestlers in the wrestling ring and we see them, kind of down on the floor, and they're, trying to get help from their partner, but that partner can't come in until he is tagged in. They're the rules of wrestling. I cannot come in. So I think that free will is a lot like that there, that help can't come unless we ask for it. And one of the big things is we do that is prayer. Prayer is like tagging in our spiritual team, tagging in God, tagging in the angels, all those wonderful instruments of God who seek to help us every day. Could you just give me your own thoughts on that?
My sense of this is we're down here together. As you said, we have free will. And there are people who are always saying, I'm going to say to God, why did you let this happen? If there's really a God? And I say, I think he's going to say to you, why did you? We feel as if we have no power. But people like Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu have shown us we have incredible power to move people to action. And we need to stop what's going on. Not sitting at home watching the news thinking, that's terrible, and now I'm going to go have my chili for dinner. But we have to do some action ourselves. I don't even remember who it was, or who it was. I keep thinking it was Desmond Tutu and Martin Luther King, or maybe Nelson Mandela was saying to him, how could God let this world be in this kind of bad shape? Like, look what we're suffering through as a people. And he said, well, that's why you're here. And so to me, diseases and everything are a part of life, and we do struggle with that. And to me, part of it is just, what is your commitment to how you live your life? No matter what's going on in your life, are you committed to being kind? Are you committed to looking around yourself to seeing someone you can help? And the more we do that, then the better the world becomes. Because, if the world was an ocean or a big jar of water, some people are putting black stuff in that water, and some of us are putting things in the water that dissolve that black stuff. And so the more of us who are putting clear things in the water that dissolve the black stuff, the better the world becomes for all of us.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful statement, beautiful sentiment. I guess on top of that, a large part of this here is also the act of forgiveness. And forgiveness is something that has really played a big part in my life, learning to forgive because of the traumas that I've endured and come into my life. And I've talked about forgiveness. I talked in one of my recent podcasts, which was about being hijacked and learning to forgive that hijacker. And I guess I kind of took it out because a lot of people said to me, that person there, they're this or that, they should face punishment for it, hanging's too good for them, they need to be shot dead. And I kind of looked beyond that person and kind of wondered, well, what causes a person, to commit an act like that there? What's led this person along their life path to become this person that they are? Is there any factors? Have they had a broken down home, no job, hanging around with the wrong people? So for me, forgiveness is about looking past that person who's done that thing and maybe trying to look beyond that at their life path and wonder, is there maybe some sort of circumstances that have led them into this here? And I also think that forgiveness forgiveness can be linked to this term of karma. If we commit a selfish act upon any other person, then that selfish act ultimately comes back around to impact on us. And I think a lot of people don't associate those acts that they initially carried out with what is currently happening within their life. So I think that the act of forgiveness also can help forgive and remove any sort of karma that you may have incurred upon another person, if that kind of makes sense. So it's kind of like a forgiveness for a thing. Jesus on the cross said, forgive them because they know not what they do. And I think that's a lot. Yeah. A lot of people do things without really thinking about it, or just don't really have the actual sense or the insight, perhaps, that potentially you, me, a lot of people would in regards to this. What about you?
It's taken a long time for me to learn to forgive certain things. And so there's a few things I noticed. One is I really can sit with God and say, I'm trying to forgive this. It happened 20 years ago. I keep thinking I've forgiven it, but then I keep thinking about it again. And usually what I'll find is underneath that thing that I'm having a hard time forgiving is a little bit of a thought that I deserved it. A little bit of a thought that I'm not good enough. And so once I'm able to address that thought and go ahead and forgive, then the heat goes out of it. It's not that we never think about it again. It's just I hardly ever think about it again unless I'm trying to think of an example of forgiveness. So, and the other thing is, I believe as a Christian that all things can be turned to our good. And no one's going to say, oh, all good things can be turned to our good, because yeah, that's obvious. It's that all things, meaning even the bad things, can be turned to our good. And so I have a story in the book called Purple, very short, about my friend who said she loved purple, but you can't get purple without red. And then she tells this story about she went to God and said, look, I can take all the bad things that happened to me except this one thing, when I was sexually abused by a favorite uncle. If only that thing hadn't happened in my life. And the answer she got, very quick thought, was, what's the character trait you are most proud of? And she immediately saw the connection between that abuse and her developing this particular character trait, which is her ability to, in a crisis situation, immediately recognize the crisis, know what to do, and take action. And I had seen her in action. We were at a restaurant once eating with some friends, and one of my friends started choking. And I was sitting there thinking, is she really choking? When this friend, my purple friend, leaped up out of her chair, did the Heimlich maneuver, out pops this little piece of meat, and the lady starts breathing again. I mean, I was still trying to figure out if she really was choking. So my friend says to me, people see the purple in you. They don't see the red that got you there.
Absolutely. Exactly. It's through our traumas and stuff like that we can, develop these great character traits, exactly as you mentioned there. And also things that I think are very important as well. I'm sure you'll agree: empathy, compassion, forgiveness that we talked about. So it definitely is. It's although it's potentially not pleasant, it can really help you grow as a person and as a spirit, and really deepen your connection then with God. Just briefly then, you also mentioned about guilt. You have a saying that guilt is to the spirit as pain is to the body, as joy is to the spirit, pleasure is to the body.
It's true. And I think about that. People are like, oh, guilt. People try to make me feel guilty. I shouldn't feel guilty. And I think, well, how do you know what's a good thing to do or a bad thing to do if you don't have guilt? And if people who got, right now, Parker has neuropathy. I was trying to think, what is that thing people, leprosy. Well, what happens with leprosy is you've lost all the feeling. And so the reason that they end up with stumps on their hands and stuff is because they don't know when they've hurt themselves. They could put it in a fire and burn their finger off. They wouldn't even realize it was happening. And so that's how I feel. If you don't have guilt, then you don't know what to stop doing. Guilt is a good thing. And yes, and the joy that comes from when you do service is on a spiritual level, just this, you've just forgotten yourself. It's that kind of joy. Yeah,
it absolutely is. It's a beautiful thing. Just to kind of wrap up here, you're also involved in 3 charities, isn't that correct?
I am. So we did have foster kids. I had foster kids in my first marriage, and I had a second marriage with Parker, and we had foster kids. And so we work with foster kids in transition. It's called My Orange Duffel Bag, and they mentor kids between the age of 18 as a getting out of their home. Imagine being kicked out of your home at 18 with no resources. Like, okay, you're done. And most of them end up in, at least 60% will end up homeless for a while. And many of the girls end up in the sex trade. So we're trying to prevent that. Then the second one we work with is with the Mayans in Guatemala. And they often come in from their small villages. They only speak Mayan. They don't speak the language of the country, which is Spanish. They have to learn that. And they're not very well educated. They often end up living in the dump in the major cities, bringing stuff out for recycling. And so we work with a charity there that provides schooling for the children, and actually has started providing education for the mothers as well. And in order for them to come, they asked the mothers what it would take. And they said, we need the kids to help recycle so we can get enough food for dinner that night. And so what they promise them is if they let the kids come to school, they'll feed the kids at school, but also they'll send food home with them so that the whole family can be fed. And that's so that's what we support. We send money to that too.
Beautiful. Absolutely fantastic. As I said before, your service really shames mine. Just as we finish off here, Margaret, it's 2022. The world is pretty much divided, in more ways than one. Is there any message that you could sum up based on your life experience for anyone who is seeking to develop that relationship with God, who's seeking to become a better person, who is seeking to potentially, listen to that voice of God, or to increase their amount of service? Is there one short, succinct sentence that you could potentially offer?
Well, I say, give your life to God by giving him your day. Give him your to-do list. It'll be amazing how much good you do.
Yeah. And that's hopefully then that will be a start for people then. Absolutely.
Right.
So where can people find you then if they want to look at your own work, if they want to listen to you, if they want to read your own posts? Is there some social media links that you could share?
If on my website, inhisfootsteps.com, I have the books there. I have kind of a scrolling thing that's showing the different blog posts. And at the very bottom of the page, the social media links of where I'm found. So, and I also have a newsletter thing that'll say, oh, do you want to sign up for my newsletter? I guarantee you will not get it more than once a month, and you won't get spam because I'm too lazy. So you'll be lucky to get a newsletter a month. And it usually has a story in it, like we've shared today.
Margaret Agard, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you and to interview today. As I said, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from reading your book. And I would urge other people to read your first book and read your subsequent books. For me, it's been about deepening my practice. It's about offering myself up more for service, which really is very hard. And obviously taking time out to offer my gratitude every day, which I've now started doing because I lapsed from that, and taking more time out of my day to go and listen to that voice. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully we'll see you again when we can discuss your future books.
Okay, thanks, Zenith. It's been a delight.
You're more than welcome.